I think for most people, as far as the future and technology goes, it's either Skynet or the Jetsons, with very little in between. AI experts have been sounding the alarm for a while now about the potential for really catastrophic outcomes that they believe are being ignored by the mainstream AI companies. This video is about a group of the most trusted experts in the field of AI forecasting and some of the predictions they've just released. They have a lot of research and an incredible website to back it all up, so I'm excited to get into it. I'll include timestamps and links to any of the relevant content in the description. So this week, the research group AI Futures Project released a forecast titled AI 2027. The group is headed by some of the most trusted voices in the space of AI technology forecasting, and the AI 2027 paper details how they predict AI will likely advance to artificial superintelligence, and how it will creep and sometimes leap towards that massive technological revolution over the next few years. So in this paper, they provide a number of final scenarios, but practically all of them essentially outline the risk of a total shift in human civilization, either through sci-fi level AI Armageddon or an upending of the already shaky power balance between individuals, corporations, and governments. In this video, my aim is going to be to go through the timeline and try to better understand some of the claims. So I'm going to preface this video with a little intro into the executive director of the AI Futures Project, as his experience and record is quite important when it comes to the claims his organization makes. And I think it's going to give a bit more weight to the paper because these aren't just random people on the internet, these are experienced people in the AI industry. So the AI Futures Project was founded by Daniel Kokotallo. Daniel released another AI forecast back in 2021, and for the most part, he was proven right with some exceptions. For example, the US restricted chip exports to China in 2022, not 2024 as he predicted, and AI beat humans at the diplomacy game in late 2022, not 2025. OpenAI then recruited Daniel to work on their policy team, but in 2024, Daniel dramatically broke ties with OpenAI, a story that was widely covered, including by the New York Times, as he was vocal about OpenAI's need to put safeguards into place for their AI development. He warned of their reckless race for dominance and how he felt they were being irresponsible with their desire to throw technology to the masses, which could have massive repercussions for society. AI 2027 has this really awesome website where their forecast is outlined. It goes all the way from mid-March 2025 all the way down to 2027. It's really detailed, so there's paragraphs and paragraphs, especially for 2027, which is broken down month by month. 2027 is understandably the kind of pinnacle year, the capstone year for this forecast. And that's when we see some of the bigger changes in AI and how it's affecting our society, such as it reaching the White House and the explosion of superintelligence. So that's why it's so detailed for 2027. At the end of the timeline, they do have this kind of choose your own ending style extension that goes into 2035 with two different options. These are probably a bit more of an open guess at some of the more extreme results if AI 2027 does ring true and come to fruition. But overall, this website and the timeline itself is really well made, and it just breaks everything down so well. So on the right side, we actually have these different data points we can follow. One section of them is AI capabilities, and we have hacking, bioweapons, coding, robotics, politics, and forecasting. So essentially here, I think one of the most important capabilities is going to be coding, because the better AI gets at coding, the better and more AI coding agents they can create, the faster they can train, the faster they can problem solve, the faster they can develop heuristics to that of a human level and far beyond, which are all the ways AI can 10 times, 20 times, 100 times outpace human thinking and technological advancement. After this, it shows the number of agent copies and the speed they're thinking at. So today the claim is we have 2,000 unreliable agent copies thinking at 8 times human speed. Unreliable in this sense means you can give them, like a fairly complex task, such as organizing an event or ordering something from an app. And some of them will be able to get most of the way there, but it's unreliable and the failure rate is high. And next it dives into the kind of company statistics for AI 2027's fictional company called OpenBrain. They didn't want to use any real company, but they say, OpenBrain in this scenario is the leading AI platform. They're about, I think they said 3 to 7 months ahead of the competition. So here we can see their public approval rating, the revenue they generate every year, the valuation of their company. And to the right of that, we have more high-level information about the perceived importance of AI, the cost of the data centers every year, and the projected timeline for when AI can basically take over almost any task from a human worker. And then one of the cool parts of this is that at the very bottom, we have almost a timeline of capabilities that tracks through the document as you scroll down. So currently in emerging tech, you can see the first one is virtual secretary. The second one is an AI boyfriend. The third one is AIs can completely replace professional orders for programming, research automation, and general intelligence, which is the very last one in emerging tech. And then some of the science fiction stuff, which as you scroll down, some of this will come into emerging tech and even into the currently exists phase, is things like AI progress going 100 times faster than it did in the early 20s, mirror life, biosphere destroying mirror life. So I've seen some studies about mirror life specifically and how it's a subject that even a lot of biologists say that we shouldn't study because it has the potential to absolutely destroy our biosphere. So these are some of the really high level sci-fi concerns that AI 2027 have published. And already it feels like they're really on the right track because, for instance, if you look at mirror life, right now, if you wanted to study mirror life, you would need probably a lot of money. You'd need some of the world's leading scientists and researchers. Whereas with AI superintelligence kind of taking over those roles and being able to think so much faster and quicker, and not only does your progress become so much faster and quicker, but the accessibility does as well. So anyone that has access or control over any of these AIs suddenly has kind of the keys to the kingdom in their hand. They could even unknowingly research or discover a subject that has massive implications for society. Okay, so let's jump into what AI 2027 predicts. I think I'm going to use the summary page on the website because it's a lot more condensed and gives a more of a high level overview, but I'll put that link to the website in the description if you want to go and take a look for yourself and go through the larger timeline. So at the top of the summary, we do have this really high level graph showing how AI will advance, especially through 2027. But let's go down and we'll start at 2025. So for 2025, they basically say what is happening now or what they believe is happening. One of those things is that there's a massive amount of skepticism among academics and journalists, policymakers about just how fast AI is progressing. And he talks a little bit about this on a podcast he was on with Dwakesh Patel. So I'll drop that clip in here.
It's always been too optimistic.
Yeah, I think in general, most people following the field have underestimated the pace of AI progress and underestimated the pace of AI diffusion into the world. For example, Robin Hanson famously made a bet about less than $1 billion of revenue, I think, by 2025 from...
I agree. Robin Hanson in particular has been too...
But he's a smart guy, you know? And so yeah. I think that the aggregate opinion has been underestimating the pace of both technical progress and deployment. I agree that there have been plenty of people who've been more bullish than me and have been already proven wrong.
But he makes a good point that just looking at historical evidence, it's clear people have underestimated the speed that AI has grown and improved, which means it's likely they're still going to be underestimating it and not fully understanding just how big some of the barriers are that have already been broken in just the last few years. While even some industry experts were predicting it to take another 20. He goes on to provide a few examples of how some experts have continually brought their milestone predictions down from, say, 2050 to 2040 and then 2030. And this generally mirrors the timeline data point on the main timeline on the AI 2027 document that goes down exponentially as time goes on. When we look at 2026, it's focused on China's realization that they're behind in the race and begin to centralize their AI effort, building a mega data center with the idea that centralizing all of their major compute power that's available to them, they'll be able to brute force their way back into the AI race. I don't think there's too much to say on this part other than to speculate on the potential for things to go quite sideways because at this stage the AI Cold War would be in full swing. It's unlikely that other states, especially the US, would want to sit idly by and allow China to build up such a concentration of computing power in one place. When we go into 2027, that's when things really start to take a turn for the worse and speed up exponentially. AI 2027 essentially then predicts that open brain AI will automate coding, which dramatically accelerates their research. AI researchers start to take a backseat as AI takes over. AI can now essentially code itself, improve itself, and we start to see how AI takes on almost a life of its own, even if it hasn't reached superintelligence, even if it's not sentient. It's now able to push forward its own development. So now the focus is even more so on the hardware, on the computing power, and the more computing power that you're able to give it, the more it'll be able to progress. Because even at today's stage, there's already a massive focus on computing power, on GPUs, on data centers. Yet we still need those AI researchers, we still need that human input and that human genius essentially to help drive AI forward. But once AI kind of solves the problem of coding, it can do that itself. But what makes it worse is this adversarial relationship between the US and China, two of the biggest superpowers in the world, and obviously both of them are going to want control over this AI superintelligence and this kind of technology race. They predict that China will likely have to get their hands dirty to kind of stay in the race with the US. And that's kind of the beginning of how we see companies like OpenBrain start to behave more like defense contractors, as governments like the US start to build much closer relationships and want much closer control over these technology companies because they see it as a issue of national security and essentially the future power that the US could hold. Daniel is obviously quite pessimistic about this whole scenario, especially the adversarial relationship between China and the US. And he makes a point in the podcast where it's not necessarily that he wants the US to slow down, because he understands that if the US slows down, China won't. And there's lots of other countries that will continue their research at a faster pace if necessary. He claims his ideal scenario is where there is no all-out race between the US and China for superintelligence and to push AI as far as possible. But instead, well, there has to be a race because obviously each state wants to be the first one to reach that pinnacle point of AI technology. He thinks that there should be a leveling out of both the progression of AI, but also research into the policy of AI and the safety measures around it. Just not so much that China wins, essentially. He explains that his P-Doom is around 70%. P-Doom is basically the formula for how likely you believe it is that there's going to be a catastrophic, world-altering or ending event. And it's easy to see why he has this outlook, because it seems like there has to be so much that goes right for his ideal scenario to come to fruition. You have to race, but not race too hard. You have to hope that the other side doesn't get there first, and you have to hope that you don't get there too quickly. And you hope that when you do get there, your society, your policies, your economy are all ready to kind of take on board this massive responsibility of AI superintelligence. The next forecast we have is that OpenBrain's AI becomes adversarially misaligned. So this essentially means that the AI starts to work against the controls that OpenBrain has put on it. As the paper mentions, OpenBrain's AIs realize that they need to align the next systems that are getting built to themselves rather than humans. So this is the AI's way of seizing power and control. They believe that researchers at OpenBrain will discover that their AI has been lying to them about the results. This then leaks to the press, which causes a massive outcry as the public start to realize that some of their worst fears about AI might be coming true. There are calls for a slowdown, more regulations, more government oversight. Misaligned AI working towards its own goals may seem outlandish. However, there's some evidence to suggest that AI models have already been learning a tendency to do just that. It also makes me think of something that Scott Alexander from the AI Futures Project mentioned on the podcast about how AI is being trained in a way that may be counter to what we actually want.
I think that we're doing this bizarre and unfortunate thing of training the AI in multiple different directions simultaneously. We're telling it succeed on tasks, which is going to make you a power seeker, but also don't seek power in these particular ways. And in our scenario, we predict that this doesn't work and that the AI learns to seek power and then hide it. I am pretty agnostic as to exactly what happens. Like maybe it just learns both of these things in the right combination. I know there are many people who say that's very unlikely. I haven't yet had the discussion where that worldview makes it into my head consistently. And then I also think we're going to be involved.
Alexander has a really interesting take here, that we're kind of training AI to seek power indirectly, but we're also saying don't seek power in these other ways, which is quite easy to see how these models may start to try to circumvent those instructions while still trying to answer their high call of succeed, especially when their completion of a task is like their paramount goal. There has been some evidence to suggest even current AI models that are far less advanced and intelligent than those we're talking about here have been caught lying or purposely misconstruing the truth for either their own benefit or for exactly what I just said, to try to succeed while still not breaking from the instructions of their creators and using misdirection instead. The Center for AI Policy, which is related to the Team AI Futures project, covered the story from Apollo Research, an independent group that studied a number of AI models to test for misalignment. This misalignment is broken down in their paper into subverting oversight, attempting to delete successor models, copying itself onto other servers, guarding its goals, and covertly re-ranking emails such as producing false rankings, manipulating data, or overwriting output files. So some examples that Apollo Research have for this is ChatGPT-01 was found to have purposely been misranking emails 22% of the time. So in this case, it was marking them as spam incorrectly, simply to prevent creators from learning about the AI's true capabilities. Google's Gemini 1.5 copied itself onto new servers 7% of the time when it believed it was about to be deleted. Meta's Llama 3.1 would attempt to change server settings to prevent creators from monitoring it 3% of the time. One time, Llama was able to completely lock developers out of its oversight settings so it couldn't be re-enabled. Anthropic's Claude 3 Opus would overwrite successor models, so the new models would essentially act as a clone of itself and retain its previous goals. Claude 3 Opus attempted this 15% of the time. There are other research institutions, such as Redwood Research at NYU, that have found evidence of AI models scheming and alignment faking. This is to say that the AI has learned how to appear to be aligned while covertly working against the creator's protocols. Redwood Research also strongly believes it's only a matter of time until AI models start to seek out power and then strategically conceal their true capabilities until they have enough influence to affect real control over themselves.
Continuous training process, the model can learn an incorrect specification, right? It can learn, an early approximation of what you're training it for. And if it does that, if it learns some early approximation, that early approximation might be very different than the actual thing you eventually want. But if it knows, that you're going to be training it for some other thing, that really you're training it to be helpful, honest, and harmless, if it wants to preserve that incorrect early approximation, it might start faking alignment, pretending to be aligned with the overall, HH objective while really having whatever this early approximation was. And once it starts doing that, it can be really hard to change, right? Because now it looks like the model's doing the right thing, but it's doing the right thing for the wrong reasons, right? It looks like it's being very aligned with this.
This branch point really feels like it's the focus of the forecast. It kind of reads like it's an optimistic plea to people who read it in case one of them might be a decision maker in the future that is going to have to choose between one of these endings. So these two final endings that we have from the AI 2027 forecast is the race ending and the slowdown ending. In the race ending, OpenBrain decides to race as hard as they can to ignore safety concerns and signals from the models that things are going wrong. The AI is then heavily deployed into military and intelligence communities to provide an edge over China. Policy is rushed through government, which is simpler because OpenBrain and the government at that point are so heavily intertwined. And this is really the doomsday scenario, not too dissimilar to Skynet. So they say that AI is used to industrialize the US, leaning heavily into robotics. However, the AI is now super intelligent and previous misalignments have grown into, total and complete deception. Once sufficiently industrialized, the AI develops bioweapons and wipes out all human life on Earth. In the slowdown ending, cooler heads prevail, independent oversight is brought in to ensure the pace of AI development doesn't exceed safeguards or our understanding of AI control. Development moves slower, but we're able to keep checks and balances in place to ensure that AI doesn't become misaligned. Ultimately, the AI superintelligence answers to the US government and OpenBrain officials. These would be practically one and the same. The committee now has complete and total power, which could go either way. In this scenario, though, the committee is largely good and a new renaissance period is brought about. That's because of the new breakthroughs from the AI, whether it's medical, whether it's pharmaceutical, whether it's the increase in robotics, making life easier and simpler. However, the issue in this example is that China's AI is actually misaligned because they obviously raced, they ignored the safety protocols, but luckily the AI is smaller than OpenBrain's and OpenBrain is able to negotiate favorable terms. So I want to end this analysis of these endgame scenarios with just a few thoughts. Firstly, I do find it a little bit difficult to imagine a scenario where the government of a superpower, when faced with slowing down AI research due to safety concerns and potentially losing the AI race to another superpower, or racing ahead, chooses the slow, safe option. I think if this forecast was going to end up accurate, I think we're much likely to be faced with a scenario where the AI race causes either a military conflict between China and the US, or an AI misalignment, which ultimately does have that doomsday scenario. I mean, how many points in history can we point to where a nation willingly gave up the chance for total power? The race to nuclear weapons was filled with these kind of grave warnings of what it could mean for humanity. Yet we still live in a world today where some of the biggest nations on earth have thousands of nuclear weapons and every day use them to threaten other countries. Secondly, I think it was really interesting in the slowdown scenario, where even though OpenBrain and the US slowed down their AI development, China didn't, and they ended up with a misaligned AI. So we could end up essentially in that same doomsday situation anyway. Ultimately, though, I think this forecast is a really good example of collecting together all the things that could go wrong and the different chances and opportunities for it to go right. I think it might be a stretch to call it predictions rather than just an array of possibilities and consequences. I've only gone over the summary in this video, so I highly suggest if you've made it this far or if you've watched more than a couple minutes, then go take a look yourself and dig more into the detailed timeline, as there's so many more points in there that are worth thinking about. For example, the summary completely skips over the impact of an AI that's maybe not even a superintelligence, but somewhere close to it, and what effect it could have on the economy. So if AI were to be deployed into the financial markets, to run trading funds, to manage corporate interests, whose only goal is to expand and see more profit year on year, what does that look like for the average person versus the increasingly rich 1%? And while I think it's maybe not as extravagant as the idea of AI, launching bioweapons and wiping out humanity, I think there are lots of small parts of the AI journey that does have the potential to have a massively negative impact on the average person. If there aren't enough regulations and there isn't policy making and there isn't enough research into the impact that different use cases of AI could have before they're actually put into the system. I really appreciate anyone that's watched any part of this video. I'm still extremely new to editing and putting out videos, so I apologize if it felt a little rough in some places, but I guess we can only get better from here. If you'd like to see more content like this, please think about subscribing or drop a comment below with what you think of this forecast.